Yes, guys, welcome back to the MMASucka podcast. As always, I'm your host, Frazer Krohn. And let's jump into it. We've got UFC 301, Pantoja versus Steve Erceg this weekend. We had I'll be honest, a boring fight night card to last weekend from the Apex again. Something I'm going to go over a little bit. And obviously, we've got the return of Canelo this weekend against Jaime Munguia. Just going to touch on the Apex card briefly, because I'll be honest, I didn't watch an awful lot of it. I caught the main and co-main events after the fact, and outside of that, I'm just looking down the card to see if I did watch anything. I didn't even catch up on anything else because I just don't care. I'll be honest. I had this rant a few weeks ago, so I'm not going to go back over it. But the UFC Apex throughout COVID was phenomenal. The UFC Apex throughout COVID kept a lot of us sane. We still got fights. And it was exactly there for the purpose that we wanted it to be. It was there so that the UFC could safely put on fights between, competitors mostly that could get into the US with, relative ease. We didn't see an awful lot of international fighters over from the likes of Europe and Australasia over in the Apex. But, we had heavyweight title fights in the Apex. We had huge fights in the Apex. But now arenas are open. Now that you've had, Madison Square Garden cards, you've had the massive UFC 300 cards. I think, yeah, off the top of my head, we've even been back to Australia. Why are we still putting on fight nights in the Apex? And it's got to be tough for the guys and girls fighting in the Apex, not having that crowd behind them. It's definitely something we need to address. But in the main event, I'm only going to touch on that because it's the only fight on the card that mattered. Um, Alex Perez put in a really good performance. Alex Perez, this is a guy who has pulled out of more fights than I think anybody maybe in the UFC. I can't remember, the last time Alex Perez sort of fought back to back in a short space of time. If you look down his record from when he lost to Davison Figueiredo by guillotine choke at UFC 255 in November of 2020, he fought once in 2020. He didn't fight in 2021. He had what, three, four cancelled bouts in 2021. Admittedly, they're not all his fault. In 2022, he had one fight and that was a loss, but he had three fights cancelled. In 2023, he had two fights cancelled. One against Kai Kara France due to a Kai Kara France injury, one against Manal Cap due to Perez having medical issues on fight night. But 2024 is looking like a good year for him. He returned against Mohamed Mokaev. Admittedly, that one didn't go his way, but then he returned on short notice against Mateus Nicolau, and that one did go his way this past weekend. It's a rare thing that we see, and this is pretty much why I'm going to go on to talk about why Erceg got the title shot a little bit later on. But it's a rare thing to see knockouts in the flyweight division just because of the weight of the guys, and yet Perez did get that big knockout over Mateus Nicolau. For Nicolau, it's a little bit disappointing. I'm not really sure of his game plan. Second straight knockout loss now. Obviously he lost to Brandon Royval, that knee up the middle, followed by the punches, and now has obviously lost to Alex Perez by knockout. Perez put in a really good performance. He was swinging for everything, but like I said, at 32 years old, he's made weight, which is a vital thing for Perez. He's made weight twice in 2024 already, and we're only in, well, we're almost in May now. He fought in March, fights again. He's fought again in April. It's really good to see that he is actually, making weight and competing regularly. And and hopefully, Perez can actually, really get back in and mix it in there with the best at 125, because it's, you know, despite the fact there's a lot of competitors at 125 that could all be in and around the title picture, this next weekend's title fight kind of suggests that there's not a lot of options. Alex Perez, at the time of speaking, is ranked number 8. Mateus Nicolau ranked number 5. Perez will probably jump a couple. There'll be a little bit of movement between Mohamed Mokaev, Alex Perez, Manal Cap, and Nicolau will probably drop beneath all of those guys. But let's not forget the 10th ranked guy in Steve Erceg is competing this weekend for the belt. And that's what I'm going to go on to talk about. UFC 301, live from Rio de Janeiro. Um, Main event, and Alejandro Pantoja versus Steve Erceg for the flyweight strap. Co-main event, Jonathan Martinez versus the returning Jose Aldo Jr. You've got Anthony Smith on the card against Vitor Petirano. Michelle Pereira featured on the card. Paul Craig is on the. That's probably one of the best fights on the card. Paul Craig versus Kyle Borrallo. Jack Shaw's on the card against Joanderson Brito. Karolina Kowalkiewicz is in a tough fight. William Gomis returns against Jean Silva. Jamie Mullarkey, Drakkar Close. It's a very, we've got a very Brazilian heavy card, which I think, let me just quickly look in 1, 2, 3, 14 fights, 14 Brazilians. And realistically, it's 14 fights, 14 Brazilians, and you could be looking at Brazilians potentially going 14-0 on this card, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. Let's not forget this is a pay-per-view card in the US. And you've got, I'd be surprised if all the Brazilians, apart from maybe Brito, are our favorites. And maybe Jose Aldo, because Jonathan Martinez has been far more active than Aldo. But the main event, like I said, I don't really see why none of the top 9 ranked guys could have made this main event. You had a very logical. You had a fight night main event with the number 5 ranked guy and the number. I can't remember who was originally in the fight, but I know it was a late booking for Alex Perez to come in and get the fight. So let me just double check that. It was Manal Cap. So okay, yeah, Manal Cap. Why could Brandon Royval just coming off the loss to Pantoja, Moreno stepping away from the sport at the moment, Amir Abazi and Kai Kara France are both injured. Mateus Nicolau obviously booked for this past weekend. Manal Cap obviously injured. Mohamed Mokaev. Why can Mokaev not turn around and fight in this guy? Tim Elliott obviously on a bit of a losing streak at the moment. So it's fallen to Steve Erceg. Fair play to Erceg. If you offered the shot to go into enemy territory and compete for the belt, you're going to do it. He's riding a long win streak at the moment, Erceg. And like I say, why wouldn't you take the fight? The Australian, let's be honest, he's getting the shot off a highlight reel. I'll say it. He's 3-0 in the UFC, 2 decisions, and then that highlight reel knockout over Matt Schnell. I've been watching a little bit of tape on Steve Erceg this week, especially that fight against Matt Schnell, because obviously that's the sort of highest level guy that he's fought. His tendencies play into the hands of Alejandro Pantoja's very, very well. Pantoja likes to get the fight to the floor. Let's just look at his takedown accuracy. Let's not forget, his takedown accuracy is 48%, but he averages 2.2 takedowns per minute. If you just look at his last 2 fights since he's been sort of competing for the belt, Brandon Moreno, 6 takedowns. Brandon Royval, 8 of 14 takedowns. He's going to look to get this fight to the floor because of the highlight reel of Steve Erceg, that big right hand, that big knockout of Matt Schnell. But Erceg gets backed up really, really easily, and that's he likes to box from the outside. He's got really, really good boxing, but he likes to box from the outside, and Pantoja likes to, shoot in on the takedown and get his opponents to the floor. Don't expect the crowd to boo it, but I don't see Pantoja putting on a fun fight in this one. I don't expect the fans to boo it because it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu in Brazil. He's elite at it. Pantoja, he's got 2 submissions in his last 4 fights when he's submitted Brandon Royval with a rear naked choke and he submitted Alex Perez with a neck crank. And then obviously he went to war with Brandon Moreno and dominated Brandon Royval in a rematch. What I'd say is that we need to. I'll go on to talk about certain nationalities headlining certain cards in a second. But this is a clear example of that. Steve Erceg, I would love it more than anything for him to go in there and just knock Alejandro Pantoja out. Not that I dislike Pantoja. I do like him. He puts on fun fights. I think he's a really standout guy. We saw that during his last fight week. And he's a dominant fighter. You know, he breathes a little bit of life. We've had two back-to-back flyweight main events, obviously, one being a fight night, this one being a pay-per-view. But how often do we have the flyweight championship of the world competed for in a pay-per-view headliner? Not very often. If you remember DJ, many a fight night headliner, not a pay-per-view headliner. Henry Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw, I know that one was slightly different because I think it was the first fight on ABC or on Fox, I forget. That was a fight night main event. TJ Dillashaw versus Dominic Cruz, fight night main event. Again, that was up at bantamweight. But you forget that flyweights don't headline events all that often, especially not pay-per-views. I could not tell you the last time we had a flyweight pay-per-view main event. Let me just, because I'm yeah, you know, Pantoja's last title fight against Brandon Royval, co-main event to Edwards and Covington. When he fought Brandon Moreno, that was co-main event to Volkanovski and Rodriguez. So, you know, this is a big one for you know, since Amanda Nunes kind of left, we haven't had too many of the lower weight class, you know, from bantamweight and below, let's say, headlining in the UFC. So it's really good for Pantoja and Erceg. Co-main event, we got the returning Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez. I don't really get this. I don't mind the fight, but Jose Aldo is 37. Jonathan Martinez is what, 29 to 30. Let's say, I think he's 30 years old. And he's in his prime, Jonathan Martinez. He's on a 6-fight win streak. Look, he's got a win over Cub Swanson, leg kicks, a win over Said Nurmagomedov, a win over Adrian Yanez last time out, also via leg kicks. I'd love these two just to go out and kick the shit out of each other's legs and see which one drops first. I don't think we'll see it, but that's what I'd love to happen. Jose Aldo, he's a Hall of Famer for a reason, one of the legends of the sport. Really, really made his name at featherweight, sort of in the WEC, and then put some really good wins together in the UFC. Obviously, then he ran into Conor McGregor's left hand in 14 seconds. I think that was almost 10 years ago now. So that'd be, I don't know, it's 9 years ago, 8.5 years ago, let's say. But, you know, regardless, he competed at UFC 200. Obviously, we've just had UFC 300. Lost to Max Holloway twice, but then bounced back really well against Jeremy Stevens and Renato Moicano with big knockouts. Then lost to the champion, Alexander Volkanovski. But then dropped down to bantamweight, and everyone was thinking, look, Jose Aldo is far too big to drop down to bantamweight, especially at his age, blah, blah, blah. He's never not made weight. He's always been the professional that we've expected him to be, and he's made weight every time. Picked up 2 losses at bantamweight, came back, beat Marlon Vera, who's just competed for the title, beat Pedro Munoz, who's a perennial top contender, beat Rob Font, who's a perennial top 10 contender, and then was just dominated by Merab Dvalishvili, the man who will be competing for the title next. He then retired, went into the world of boxing, competed 3 times, drew with Jeremy Stevens, and now he's returning. I'm not really sure why he's returning, especially don't understand why he's returning at 135. I'll be honest, I'm picking Jonathan Martinez in this because you know, for context, Jose Aldo's last performance, last outing was on the Usman versus Edwards 2, the head kick heard around the world on that card. I think that was the co-main event on the night. Oh no, it was a 3rd fight on the main card on the night. Jonathan Martinez has been regularly competing since then. That was in August of 2022. Since then, Jonathan Martinez has had 3 fights, Cub Swanson side now, Nurmagomedov and Adrian Yanez, and he's only just hitting his prime. Martinez is dangerous on the feet. I think he's got enough takedown defense to sort of avoid Jose Aldo if Aldo looks to take it to the floor, which I don't think he will. I think this will be mostly a stand-up battle, but I think the UFC are going to be paying Jose Aldo probably the most on the card to compete, because if he wasn't on the card, the fight is not good. The fight card is not good. And I always think of it as, if someone from the main event pulled out, is the co-main event good enough to hold the card up? Now, if this fight wasn't on it, there was absolutely no chance I think the card would be scrapped. The fact that this fight's on it, the King of Rio returning to Rio, I think the Brazilian fans for sure will would accept that. If for whatever reason the main event did fall out and it's Jonathan Martinez versus Jose Aldo, the 3-round, probably non-pay-per-view main event, yeah, I don't mind it. I'll always tune in to watch Jose Aldo fight. I'll always tune in to probably watch Jonathan Martinez fight. I just don't get this one from a competitive or from a rankings position, really. Jonathan Martinez ranked number 13. Obviously, Jose Aldo, having retired, isn't in the rankings. Martinez, 6-fight win streak, like I said, 3 since Jose Aldo last competed. For me, Jonathan Martinez probably sees this as a why not. It's probably quite a free hit. He can go in there, be the bad guy. He's going to get booed all week. Press conferences, media days are going to be tough for him because it'll all be about the return of Jose Aldo. But, it is what it is. Anthony Smith versus Vitor Petrino. Petrino's what, 4-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes and 2 decisions. He's beat Medeiros Bukauskas and Marcin Prashnio, and then beat Tyson Pedro last time out. Yeah, he takes on Anthony Smith. If you remember, Anthony Smith's last outing was getting absolutely battered by Khalil Roundtree. I don't really know what Anthony Smith's intentions are. If he intends to be a gatekeeper to the top 10, top 15, that is very much what he's kind of doing. He's ranked number 10 now. Petrino, sorry, is ranked number 15. I mean, what can we expect from Anthony Smith? Like I said, he got badly knocked out by Khalil Roundtree last time after losing the fight. He got battered by Johnny Walker. He got battered by Magomed Ankalaev. He got a split decision over Ryan Spann in between Johnny Walker and Khalil Roundtree, but that's a Ryan Spann that he'd beaten 2 years previous. It was a pointless. He beat Jimmy Crute due to a leg injury. He's Anthony Smith, he's had 37 wins and 19 losses. He's very much past his prime. I'm not really sure where his prime was. Maybe it was when he fought John Jones, or maybe it was the fight after that. Let's not forget, if he didn't have the bottle, he could have taken the knee from John Jones to a down opponent, probably have his name, in lights as a former champion. But he didn't take the easy way out, as it were. Did fight on, was battered, and will never be a UFC champion. But it is what it is. Michel Pereira's on the card. I love Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira will never be a UFC champion, but he will always put on fun fights. He's 7-fight win streak at the moment. Last time out, rear naked choke victory over Mikhail Olenczejczuk. Was meant to face Mahmoud Muradov. Muradov withdrew, so he's now facing here Pretoria. Pretoria, I think, probably best known for being the man who retired Mauricio Shogun Rua. He only competed in February. He's taken this one on short notice, and he missed weight last time out, which isn't a good look. He was booked for the Saudi Arabia card to face Sharon Magomedov. Obviously, he's been rebooked, so I think the UFC are looking for a new opponent for Magomedov. We've got Paul Craig versus Kyle Barallo, which, like I say, is one of the best fights on the card. Barallo, undefeated in the UFC, undefeated since 2015. Puts on very fun fights, sets a very high pace from the off, and is a fun watch. And you compare that to Paul Craig, who puts on very, very fun fights, who puts on a fairly high pace and is a very fun watch. I'm very, very much here for this fight. Paul Craig obviously dropping down to middleweight to face Andre Muniz, beat him, then lost to Brendan Allen. And I think that was a headliner. Yeah, it was a headliner at middleweight back in November. Um, Staying at middleweight for now, and I think that's probably the right move for him. As long, he's got a style that really suits the Brazilian crowd. The Brazilian crowd won't mind him pulling guard and dropping to his back, and he's more than happy to step into enemy territory. We've seen it multiple times. I think he's even fought. Yeah, he likes to play the bad guy, Paul Craig, but he is facing a real problem in Kyle Barallo. Barallo, he's heavy-handed. Just looking down his record now, he's got 7 wins by decision, 4 by submission, 4 by TKO. He's very well-rounded, very heavy-handed, and like I said, will set a high pace. But let's not forget, if this fight does go to the floor, you're in Paul Craig's world. Didn't go his way last time against Brendan Allen, and he'll be really pissed off about that one. But there's a good chance that it'll go his way this time. But he has got an uphill battle against the hometown boy in Kyle Barallo. Moving on, yeah, Jack Shaw really looking to continue that kind of run at featherweight now. He's obviously moved up in weight since losing to Ricky Simone. He's now a fully fledged featherweight. Hasn't really been active at featherweight. He's had one outing where he beat Makwanami Akani by rear naked choke in the second round of their bout in London. He's got a very, very good ground game, but he's coming up against Joe Anderson Berto, who's on a 4-fight win streak. All of them finishes, two submissions, 2 TKOs. This has got fight of the night written all over it. From a personal perspective, I hope Jack Shaw wins, obviously being from the UK. But yeah, like I said, it's an uphill battle. Lasmin Lucindo, apologies if I butchered that. She's 3-0. Sorry, 3 fights into her UFC career, 2 wins, 1 loss. 22 years old, coming up against a very experienced Karolina Kovacevic, who's seeing somewhat of a career revival as of late. Obviously, she lost 5 straight, but then she beat Felice Herrig, beat Silvana Gomez Juarez, beat Vanessa Demopoulos, beat Diana Belbita. She's up against it this weekend, but I do think she can do it. Who knows? Jamie Malarkey, never in a boring fight. Drakkar Klose, very rarely in a boring fight. And we've got Ismail Bonfim back in action for the first time in what seems like a... Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, he missed weight last time out and his fight was cancelled in November. It's okay. The card out of 10, I'd probably give it a 6. For pay-per-view, coming off the back of UFC 300, I want better than a 6. But I did want to talk about, I'm going to go to talk very briefly about Jaime Munguia versus Canelo Alvarez next, but I just wanted to talk about this kind of autonomy that certain fighters have over certain fight cards. For some reason, every single Brazilian card has to be headlined by a Brazilian. Every single UK card in recent memory has been headlined by someone from the UK. Every single Abu Dhabi card has to be headlined by a Russian. It's really frustrating because there are far better fights that you could have put on for this card. Every single Australian card has to be headlined by someone from Australasia, whether it be Whitaker or Volkanovski or Israel Adesanya. There was a lot of potential for this card coming off the back of UFC 300. It feels like we're right up here, and now we've dropped all the way down. On paper, I gave UFC 300, I think, a 9.5 or a 9 out of 10. After the fights, 10 out of 10. Probably the best fight card I've ever seen. Certainly on paper, and it lived up to expectation. This one, 5.5, 6 out of 10 maybe, and we'll see what it is after. If we get 14 spinning back kick knockouts, I'll think A, someone is on the take, but B, there's it's probably going to be another 10 out of 10 card. But just on paper, this is not as entertaining a fight card. But like I said, why is it that we have to have Brazilian guys headlining in Brazil? Of course, you're going to lean towards the Brazilian guys and girls headlining in their home country because it just makes logical sense. But why do we have to have that? Now, I don't know. I'm just looking at the champions. I don't think anyone else could have turned around to compete on this card. Could Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier turn around to compete on this card? I think that would have been a little bit too much to ask. Dricus du Plessis, could he have competed on the card? I think that would have been too much to ask. Alex Pereira probably could have turned around. I think he would have been more than capable. And I think there's a couple of guys that would have put their hands up to compete against him. Alexa Grasso even, could she have, I know they're filming tough, but could she have turned around? And John Jones, I've already made my thoughts clear on Twitter about John Jones. I simply, I've lost interest in the return of John Jones and John Jones as a fighter. But I put a podcast out. I put a poll out on the MMASucka Twitter I think last night. Just saying, what is your excitement for this weekend's card? 0 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 10. 32.1% of people that have answered that they are 0 to 2 in the 0 to 2 bracket of excited for this weekend's card. 3 to 5 has got 39.3, 6 to 8 is 21.4, and 9 to 10 is 7.1. Now, I think if you would have asked about UFC 300, you'd be majority 9 to 10, some 6 to 8, and some clueless people would be 3 to 5. I don't think anyone would be 0 to 2 unless they're just trolling, which is a shame. But going back to the point I just asked, Islam Makhachev, I think this will, why is he pretty much nailed on for the October card? Dricus and Israel, why are they pretty much nailed on for the Australia card? Tom Aspinall and Leon Edwards, why are they nailed on for the UK card? I went to a UK fight night good few years ago now, and it was Alexander Volkov versus Fabricio Verdum. That wasn't due to anyone pulling out. That was the main event. You've got a main event this weekend that is a Brazilian guy versus an Australian guy. Great, but why is Steve Erceg not a shoe-in for the Australia card? I mean, he might be, but we'll see how this weekend goes. That autonomy over certain, certain fighters being from certain areas and forcing the UFC to pick them as the main event. Now, there is the exception. If the UFC go to Spain, it has to be Ilia Topuria because he's the man that took the UFC to Spain. There hasn't been a great clamber to get the UFC to Spain before Ilia Topuria, so it wouldn't make sense for, let's say, Raquel Pennington and Kayla Harrison to headline there. None of those girls have an affiliation with Spain, and none of them have been the really driving factor of getting the UFC to Spain. It's just disappointing. It's really disappointing. But it is what it is, and it's not going to change. Moving on, Canelo Alvarez versus Jaime Munguia this weekend, undisputed super middleweight title, all Mexican affair on Mexican Independence Day. I think Canelo schools Munguia. Munguia's got one of the most padded records in all of boxing, 43-0. He's still young. He's 27 years old. Who's he fought? Who has he fought? He fought John Ryder. He fought Sergey Devanchenko, Gabe Rosado, Gary O'Sullivan, Liam Smith in 2018. Who's he fought? And you're almost saying about Canelo. Who's Canelo fought in the past couple of years? Jamal Charlo. Yeah, we've heard of him, but he didn't have any business being in there with Canelo. John Ryder didn't really have any business being in there with Canelo. Gennady Golovkin, third fight, got Golovkin at a good time. I think he's very lucky that he fought Dimitri Bivol and not Ilunga Makabu on that night in 2022. But he hasn't got a win via finish since Caleb Plant in November 2021. He finished three fights that year. He finished them all. Anthony Yildirim, fucking what it is with him. I don't know. Yeah, fucking Billy Joe Saunders led him to quit on the stool, and Caleb Plant finished 3 fights in 2021. Had 1 fight in 2022. 2 fights in 2022. Lost 1 to Bivol. Dared to be great. I'm absolutely behind that. but then went sort of a step back and took on Golovkin. And then John Ryder and Jermall Charlo last year, kicking the fight the year off. Now we'll see him out again in September against Jaime Munguia. Munguia, like I said, he's got one of the most padded records in all of boxing. 43-0, and he's really never really been tested. You know, like I said, Liam Smith in 2018, John Ryder last time out, Sergei Divonchenko. I mean, he's fought. You know, I don't. Yeah, I don't know about Jaime Munguia. I think they're looking to get into that illustrious 50-0, but I think they've also now recognized that people are getting a little bit sick of seeing him just knock over people that he's expected to beat. And I think Canelo might put on a 12 round clinic against Jaime Munguia. And Jaime Munguia might go on to be really, really good, but he'll always have that blemish of a loss to Canelo on his record, similar to what Canelo did. You know, he dared to be great, took on Floyd Mayweather, lost that fight, and Floyd Mayweather has always said, you know, he's always got that to fall back on. No matter how great Canelo is, I hold a win over him. Very sensible from Floyd, and this is arguably very sensible from Canelo, getting Munguia before he really hits his prime. But like I said, 43-0, and he hasn't really fought anyone. It's a bit disappointing. It's also disappointing that it is Munguia anyway, because the fight to make is David Benavidez for Canelo. Maybe we'll get that later on in the year in September, but there's also now talk of it being Terence Crawford. So who knows? Who knows with boxing? Nobody knows with boxing. But you know, it is what it is. Like I said, it's all eyes on Brazil. Pretty decent, you know, Brazilian. If you're Brazilian, it's a very decent card. If you're not getting up in the middle of the night to watch it. Let's just say that. You've got Canelo versus Munguia. You've got an Octagon card this weekend, I think, from Germany. Yeah, Frankfurt, Germany. It's a pretty quiet week. We've got, you know, next week we've got a fight night card. I'll go on to talk about the fight night card next week because it's a tough one again. We've got Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. Come on, do better. There's one fight on there. There's a couple of fights on there that I'm interested in, but I'll go on to talk about that next week. And we've got Lomachenko versus George Kambosos next week from Perth. George Kambosos is back garden. So, you know, we've got some fights to look out for coming. Oh, fucking Lucas Brown's back. Jesus Christ. We've got some fights to look forward to in the upcoming weeks, but I wouldn't say this one is this weekend's UFC pay-per-view is going to get you up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a UK fan. I don't think the pay-per-view numbers are going to be massive, but you know, can Steve Erceg do it? I'd like to see him do it. I think it'd be fun to see, but I doubt it. But we'll see. Thanks for listening, guys. Like, subscribe. As always, code SUCKER at manscaped.com. 20% off, free worldwide shipping. You are welcome. I've been Frazer Krohn. I'll catch you next week.